As Democrats pretend that there's no crisis on the southern border and the mainstream media backs up that narrative, we are joined today by a very special guest. Her name is Ruth Martin. She's an activist who decided to get involved in the border security issue after something horrible happened to her. Ruth, thank you for joining the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I am a angel wife first, and I am a chaplain that comes to the aid of angel families all across this country. I was married for just 5 months at the time that my husband was shot by an illegal alien who had been arrested a week prior to the shooting for the same crime. In the state of California, unfortunately, it is pretty lax when it comes to our immigration laws. They allowed him to bail out of jail, and he went on to commit the attempted murder of my husband. But that bullet that did take down my husband at the time, it left him paralyzed. It did its job 12 years later. My husband ended up succumbing to injuries from that initial shooting. He was an amazing man. He loved his country. He loved God. He loved me. He loved his family, and he wanted to live. But Congress failed him 28 years ago, just as they're failing us now. I believe that this president is doing everything in his power to protect and preserve American lives. Unfortunately, you have the Democratic Party who is undermining his every step, and this has to stop. And I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak on the behalf of the angel families out there.
Ruth, what do you have to say about the recent shooting of the California Police Corporal Ronald Singh by a man who is an illegal immigrant who is using fake social security numbers to be in this country? This is something actually that the IRS ignores when they find out that illegal immigrants are using fake social security numbers. This man had 2 prior arrests. What goes through your mind when you hear something like that?
The fact that we should mandate e-verify, and it should go all the way down to contract workers. Like I said, this country, unfortunately, and Congress has failed this family. I attended Corporal Ron Singh's funeral. In my heart of hearts, I knew I had to be there for that widow. And I drove down. Actually, I hit snow. I was coming down from the Yosemite area. And I can't begin to tell you how touching, how heartfelt, and how emotional it was to be there and to see all of these officers sitting row after row after row before me. I was actually in an overflow room. And one thing that really affected me was watching at the very, very end of the memorial video was a little clip of this man who was just blowing little raspberry kisses on his beautiful little baby boy. And as I turned both to my left and to my right, I could see officers wiping their eyes. This hit home. This hit home for everyone. This is just another broken family at the altar of the Democratic. It's their altar of immorality, because Nancy Pelosi says that a wall is immoral. I tell her that sweeping the lives of Americans who have been murdered by illegal aliens, that's immoral. And we as a country need to do everything in our power to contact our elected officials and demand that they come up with that $25 billion that President Trump is asking for to build the wall.
Ruth, we often hear that we're not supposed to politicize tragedies, right? Even though members of Congress are politicizing the fact that some of these government workers are not getting paid. When you hear that you shouldn't politicize a tragedy like the kind that happened to you, do you agree with that? Or do you think that, obviously based on your work, it seems like you have taken this as a chance to try to change things? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. Without sharing our stories, you have individuals like Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who stands on her bully pulpit and screams manufactured crisis. So unfortunately, we do have to relive telling our stories over and over, because unfortunately, they don't want to believe, or they do believe, but they don't care. I don't understand why the Democratic Party is not sympathetic toward us, the victims. I don't understand why news segment after news segment we hear about yet another American citizen who has become a victim to whether it's crimes with MS-13, whether it's vehicular manslaughter because an illegal alien got behind the wheel intoxicated. We have to share our stories. And I can't tell you how many angel families that I'm working with specifically uh, who are so tragically affected. I have one family who the mother was traveling home and she had her young child in the back seat. An illegal alien got behind the wheel and plowed into them. This beautiful little boy watched as his mother died. This young child has ideation of suicide. This is what's happening. This is the reality of illegal alien crime. I'm sorry, I'm choked up. I'm just speaking to this child. It breaks my heart. But families are broken. They are shattered. And I just don't know what else to do other than to share our stories and to plead to Speaker Nancy Pelosi, to Congress, and actually many of Republicans who have decided to turn their back on America's victims. Please, we ask that you fund this wall. We ask that you help this president who is doing everything in his power to protect and preserve American lives. This is a reality. You know, I can't even begin to tell you the loss of Dan Gulvich and Julie Gulvich. Their 25-year-old son was traveling home. He had just dropped off his girlfriend. This young man was a rising star. He was a musician. He owned his own business. He employed several employees, doing really well for himself. He was on his way home and he stopped at a stoplight. And the man that pulled up next to him was an illegal alien who had crossed into our border numerous times, who had been deported numerous times. He was angry. Allegedly, he had had an argument with his girlfriend and he wanted to kill. And that's exactly what he did. He shot numerous people that night. Dan Gulvich's son, Spencer, was one of them. He never saw it coming. He shot him in the head. And this young man's body slumped over. He was no more. And Julie Goldvatch has often said, I'll never hear a person say, Mom, I'll never hear or see my son again. I'll never have a hug from my beautiful child again. This was her only child. This is why we share our stories, not out of anger, not out of political vendetta. It's out of love. It's out of love because we don't want any other families to experience what we've experienced. So thank you for asking me that question.
Ruth, if Congress does not fund the president's border wall, do you believe that the president should use the national emergency option in order to build it himself?
Absolutely, because it is a national emergency. I'm sure that you watched the Oval Office address, just as millions of Americans did. And what we heard President Trump share with us, the unbelievable numbers. In just 2 years, ICE arrested 266,000 illegal aliens who were directly responsible for 100,000 assaults, 30,000 sex crimes, and 4,000 murders. This is a national emergency. Absolutely. If Congress refuses to fund this wall, then yes, Mr. President, it's time to do everything in your power. If they choose not to help, then we need to go a different route. But we need to secure our border and we need to build that wall.
Ruth, it is staggering the evil that exists in the world, but I think that your voice and the voices of people who are also in your situation is making a big difference. And I hope, and I think we all hope, that something gets done about it very soon. Ruth, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you. I also would like to thank Maria Espinoza and the Remembrance Project for shining a light on these crimes for the last 9 years and for continuing to do this work, even in the light of all of this animosity that's taking place with the other side, the Democratic Party, who is just denying it. We cannot deny what's taking place in this country. God bless you, sir. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.